Hey guys, this is Tearless here with my review for Killzone Shadowfall. This was my very first next-gen game that I bought. This was the game that I bought with my PS4 when it came out. It was the only game that I had with my PS4. I was saving for my first-person shooters for my Xbox One because I like the button layout better that way. But I did want to experience Killzone, and I wanted to experience a first-person shooter on the new DualShock 4, and so I was very happy to go ahead and pick up Killzone. However, this game, I enjoyed playing through it all the way straight through. I mean, I would get back from class and I'd be like, man, I want to go back and I want to go back and play more Killzone. But at the same time, there were a lot of downfalls of this game, and we'll get into that as we go forward. Starting off is going to be with graphics of this game. The graphics of Killzone are, it was intended to be a graphical masterpiece. It was intended to show off the capabilities of the PlayStation 4. And as such, if you're looking through this, the lighting effects, everything are really beautiful in this game. The UI, everything on the screen looks fantastic. However, as I started to go and recapture game footage and so forth, there was one thing that I noticed, and that's that the developers really focused on two major points in the game, and that's really your see-through, your fly-through and whatnot of Vecta City, and Vecta City was done really well, and you're going to be seeing that up here in just a second. And other than that, the other thing that they did really well, I believe, was at the very end of the game, which I think is at the very end of this video. They focused really hard on those 2 points and the levels surrounding those 2 points, which are very few. And then the rest of the levels were like the scene from the very beginning of this video. Dark, damp, not much texture detail, and so forth. And that's kind of one of the things that I didn't like about it. Vecta looked unbelievable. Whenever I lived in a dorm at the time, whenever I wanted to showcase, what the PlayStation 4 could do, I would pull up this chapter right here, and I'd be like, hey guys, check this out. It's pretty awesome. And they thought it was amazing. But as you play through the game, and as I was beginning to go back and look through recordings of the game, I was really disappointed in that they kind of like they focused on certain things, and then that's what they showcased, and then the rest was kind of like not as well done. And so I knocked off 1 point for it. It just wasn't up to the caliber I felt in in Rise that I saw. Rise, it seemed as though everything was done to a full detail, whereas this, they took shortcuts and so forth. There are areas in which you can see the background is more of a painted type background instead of actually, in-game and so forth. And that was kind of disappointing. But otherwise, they did a fantastic job of blending those elements together to make something visually incredible on a large scale, because some of the Killzone scenes are much more large scale than Rise, but at the same time they didn't pay attention to details as much as I would have liked to, and I wish they would have focused more on the entire game instead of a few specific areas that they were focusing on. As I was going back through and recording gameplay footage in single player and in multiplayer, one thing that kind of disappointed me was the sound and music design that came out of this game. One thing that was good was the music did to some degree complement what was going on, even in this sequence right here. But that was the problem with it is that it became repetitive. If I were to show you even more gameplay footage, you'd hear almost this exact same music play through another combat scene, through maybe very little minor variation. But for the most part, it was just so repetitive. I'm like, man, I'm doing the same thing over and over again and whatnot. And I wish they had varied it a little bit more. The sound effects in this game, I thought, were pretty bad. They were the level of Call of Duty, kind of pretty pathetic. I felt they could have done a whole lot better with it. There were some other sound effects that were better, but the gun mechanics in general were pretty bad. Even the sound effects coming through here as he puts up the hologram is actually pretty cool. But for the most part, the sound effects across the board were pretty bad, and it's really shown in the multiplayer. In the multiplayer, pretty much all you have is sound effects. And when you play something like Battlefield 4, you play Call of Duty, there's always stuff going on. But in the multiplayer of Killzone Shadowfall, it's so dry. You sit there and all I can hear is my footsteps running around. I can't hear gun battles that are going far away or whatnot. I have to actually be pretty close before I can really start to hear gun battles that are going on. And so the whole thing felt dry to me, and I don't want that to be the case when I'm going through multiplayer. I want to always feel intense and in the combat, something that Battlefield 4 does really well. Call of Duty does just because you're in a really, really fast-paced environment. This is more of a slow-paced environment on small maps like Call of Duty, but you don't have the sound effects to really fill in everything, and that's one thing that was really disappointing on the sound throughput of Killzone Shadowfall. As far as design mechanics and level design are concerned, I thought they did a pretty good job, especially in the level design department in terms of both multiplayer and single player. I thought they did a really great job of, designing the maps and designing how you went through the single player experience. I love the multiplayer maps that were put in this game. They were smaller, more Call of Duty like maps. I liked Call of Duty maps, Call of Duty Ghost maps. I was one of the few, and I like these even better. There were ways to get around your enemy and whatnot. You could route them from different angles and so forth. You could sneak around. There were nooks and crannies for you to hide in. I really liked what they did with these multiplayer maps, and I thought it came across really well. In single player, I like how they varied. Not only did they vary, the places that you were, but they varied the content that you did. It wasn't straight, I'm going to do nothing but run and gun the entire game. I don't like it when first-person shooters do that. I know that's what a first-person shooter to me is. I'm going to have a gun in my hand, and that's what I'm going to be killing with that gun. Not I'm going to be Rambo and do nothing but kill with my gun. You know, I if you watch a Bond movie, he's not firing his pistol 24/7. In a video game, I don't want to be doing that the entire time either. I want to be, maybe there's a mission where I want to be stealthy or whatnot, and there's a mission you want to do this. Specifically in this one, this is a sequence where I'm escaping from a prison, and I am running across these crates and so forth to try and get out of wherever I am at the point, I don't remember. And that's the kind of varied gameplay that I like. And I also like that they added, things you could do with the environment. Towards the beginning of this video, you saw I was able to shoot out the shutters of the station I was on, and the hot light would burn the enemies that were coming in. That was kind of like a different thing that you could do in this game. And so, in terms of level design, they did a fantastic, I thought, with Killzone. They did a fantastic job with Killzone. Now, as far as design mechanics are concerned, this is where the cons come in of this category. Is first of all, the bot that you get, its attack capabilities were far overpowered. There were many times in which I don't feel like dealing with this. I would just send the bot in, and he'd sit there and destroy everything on his own. And I wasn't playing hard, but I was playing on normal, and it was just easy to just send the bot in there and let him do all the work, and then you just kind of sit behind cover and do nothing. I'm like, well, that was easy. The gun design in this game was pretty awful. And as I went through multiplayer through my first time, I could not believe how many guns felt and worked the same. It was awful. Like, there was absolutely, there would be 4 different assault rifles, and they'd all feel the same. They'd look different, and they'd maybe have a different laser, like a red dot sight, but they were the same. They felt the same. It just didn't work out. I don't know. It's like there was no imaginary difference between any of the guns, and I don't know why they did that. Now, ironically, right before the patch came out, I started, collecting multiplayer footage, and then they released a patch for new free maps or whatnot. And of course, this is a week before Titanfall comes out, and they actually varied the guns a bit. I logged on that day because I did it over 2 days taking gameplay footage. I logged in that day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a little bit of difference between the guns now. It's not all the same guns all the time. Otherwise, that's the only thing that they did that I'm like, okay, you know, okay, there's a little bit difference now, but it's still not a lot. You still have pretty much all the guns that are the same. Unlike in Battlefield 4 and in Call of Duty, where your guns are varied. You have actually a huge difference from using this gun or using this gun. And that's a big deal. And you never got that in this game. It's like, okay, I can pull out any weapon and be just fine with it. And that was really disappointing, and I really wish that they had done more with it. I'm glad that they tried to patch it in, but really that should have been in, you know, a long time ago. So one thing I did like in the mechanics of the game is that they did, even though the bot was overpowered, they did, you know, provide some utility with him in the single player experience. And I also like how they, in multiplayer, you were given different like items to use. It kind of was like, it felt like it was stealing off of uh, Halo, but I haven't played other Killzones, so maybe Halo was stealing off of Killzone. I don't know. So, but I did like how you had, you know, each class had its own little thing that they could add to the multiplayer experience of the game. I really did like Killzone's storyline. It kept me engaged. I always found myself going back and like trying to find stuff out. I've never played Killzone before, so I was like, okay, so what are these guys? What are these guys? And the storyline was presented evenly across the entire game. It wasn't like Rise, where it was like just the beginning and the end, and I was like dry space in between. It was constantly going on, and I really liked it. And I like how they set the series up to continue. The only problem I really had was the narration was a little cheesy at times, and the main character was really presented kind of poorly. Kind of felt like the guy was kind of like, the main character was kind of like Mr. Whatever. He was kind of like, I don't care, you know, so much about him. I cared about him even less than I did about the people in Call of Duty Ghosts, and I really didn't care about anybody in Call of Duty Ghosts. So. But if they continue the storyline with the person I think they're going to have a character that's going to be awesome, I think, considering if you play this game, so that'll be really cool. The biggest problem with Killzone Shadowfall was the multiplayer of this game. If you're gonna put out a multiplayer of this game, it better be good. If the single player is not going to be ridiculously good and long, because Shadowfall's single player campaign was not that long at all. It took me less than a couple of days to beat it, and it was probably, I don't know, 7 to 8 hours, which is really small. If you're going to make it that small, you better make sure that your multiplayer is really, really good, so I can dump some hours into it and get my gameplay value out of it, and I didn't. The multiplayer of this game did not give that to me. It was a very dry multiplayer. Sound effects weren't that great, as I mentioned before. No music, nothing to fill in this space. The abilities weren't balanced very well. There was no variation in gun design. They focused too much on the graphics of the maps, and it just felt unpolished everywhere. There were people lagging where I don't know if that was a problem with the PlayStation Network or there was an actual problem overall, but they needed to fix it. If you're going to put out a game and you're going to have a single player campaign that doesn't last long enough, you better have a fantastic multiplayer so I get my gameplay value out of it. Otherwise, it's just not worth buying the game. Titanfall has it right. They have nothing but multiplayer in it, and they're trying to make their multiplayer as fun as possible. The Order 1886 is hopefully going to have it right. They have nothing but a single player campaign, and the story better be good, and it better be at least 15 hours, or else you're not getting your gameplay value out of it. That's the biggest problem with Killzone Shadowfall. I can't believe I actually logged into the multiplayer, and they actually felt that it was a finished product. It was kind of pathetic. I really hope they make another one, they do something better to make it better, but otherwise that really killed the gameplay value of this game. Unless you really like stories, there's no point in getting this game, because it's just not good enough with the amount of content that they provided, because the multiplayer is so lackluster. That's why when you log in, there's only at most like 1,000 people online, because it's not fun at all. It's way too dry. That's the first thing that came to my mind when I played through it. It was like dry. I was trying to capture gameplay footage, and I was like, man, when is this going to be over? Not that great. So overall, I mean, Killzone Shadowfall gets a 6.2. I hope they do better next time around. Otherwise, tearless out. See ya.